Most business owners are flying blind. They think because money's coming in, they're growing. But if you don't know your margins, cash, and even break even, you're not running a business, you're running on luck. Now, the challenge is that where do people go for this information? They're accountants. They go to their accountants and they get the information probably when it's a little bit too late. Yeah, it could be that you're having yearly accounts, quarterly accounts, but still, you're looking in the rearview mirror. Today, I'll sit down with John Charman. He's not just an accountant, he's an entrepreneur. What does that mean? It means that he's scaling businesses in the context of accountancy. And he's going to show us some blind spots that he's seen when working with his clients. But most of all, ladies and gents, he's going to share his journey of some of the blind spots of being an accountant that he didn't even notice that has really allowed him to open up the constraints in his business to become not just an accountant business owner, but an accountant entrepreneur moving forward to bigger things. As always, guys, this podcast relies on you guys to share it. So if you're getting value from it, slide it into someone's DMs and drop us a comment. Let us know the feedback. Do you like these sort of podcasts? Do you like these episodes? So we can create more. This is your journey, your story. So, John, welcome to the show, mate, as a co-host. Really appreciate you coming on, and I'll see you coming on again in the future as well. So tell us a bit of a background about who you got started, your accounting journey, and what some of the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Good afternoon, Lewis. How you doing? Thanks for having me on the podcast, first of all. I started my accounting journey in about 2007. Essentially worked at a couple of different firms. All right, well, I say a couple. I worked at 3 different firms. Done all my training, as you typically do when you're an accountant, and then ultimately, the real focus is on your training and making sure that you're getting the exams done. And then towards I kind of done the do, so to speak, and over the course of 9 years, got all my exams done, etc., and then qualified as a chartered accountant in 2016. And then I made one more move to another firm, and then a couple of years down the line, I was starting to question some of the decisions that were being made, and I suppose ultimately I wasn't really born as I definitely wasn't born as an entrepreneur. It very much become a case, Lewis, that I think I saw what was being done elsewhere, and I just thought to myself, I think I could do this better.
Well, that's what the entrepreneurs are, aren't they, mate? At the end of the day, there's a problem out there, and an entrepreneur is there to solve it.
Yeah, I suppose when you put it like that, but I wouldn't have been thinking about these things at the time. So yeah, around the back end of 2018, I made the decision that I was going to leave and start my own business. And interestingly enough, it was a little bit of a worrying time because my wife was pregnant with our second child, and her maternity pay run out in May 2019, which is ultimately when my notice period run out of my current job. So we went 31st of May 2019, 2 pretty good salaries, to the 1st of June, and it was from that moment on, it was all on me.
Isn't that interesting, though? I mean, before we get into the content that you're going to help with founders and entrepreneurs, business owners, even their employees that are out there, I think this is an interesting journey because there has to be some sort of boiling point where people break through from what would have been a very technical career of you being in the accountancy in like a corporate accountant firm. You've decided to say, enough is enough during a time where things was about to get very difficult and a new baby was about to come along. Just share with us. I mean, that takes a certain type of crazy bastard to do that, and we call these entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, when you put it like that, I suppose it does really. I think so. don't get me wrong, we'd planned and we had saved a sum of money, which was going to keep us going from a personal point of view. However, I'm not going to lie, I did sit there the first couple of weeks. I was sitting there on my, populating my database with names, national insurance numbers, date of births, and there was a couple of moments when I sat there and I thought to myself, what on earth am I doing?
But what drives you, mate? Because the same driver that made you realize, shit, why am I sitting here doing this? And then the same thing that kept you going when you thought, oh shit, again, what the heck am I doing? What's the driver behind it?
That's a really interesting question. I'm driven by the thought of getting success, but without really, and at that time certainly, without understanding really what success meant. But I suppose ultimately at that particular time, Lewis, I had to make it work for my family. I put myself in a really uncomfortable position. And when you put yourself in uncomfortable positions, it's amazing what you can find yourself achieving later on.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the show so far and you're getting a lot of value from it. Look, we do this for free because it's our vision to help more businesses and their teams scale and actually achieve what they went into business and their career for. So these raw boardroom style conversations deliver the real data on what works and what doesn't, saving you time, money, and most of all, making sure that you don't miss on these opportunities that could really help you scale. Sharing it with people you know really, really supports us on these podcast platforms so we can achieve our vision. So if you have a like-minded friend, colleague, or business owner that could get value from this, thank you for sharing it with them. You know who you are, and greatest respect for everybody that's doing that so far. And if you haven't, then please support us. Let's get back to the show. So what do you mean about that then? I mean, sorry to dive down. We haven't even gone into the stuff about numbers yet, but this is really interesting because ultimately we can learn the do from most people. But when the going gets going, it's the tough people. I don't even know what that saying is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The tough get going. So what is when you said you found out what success actually means, tell us about that.
Well, I think until, I want to say, the last 18 months, I just very much felt that success was very much about money and having the ability to earn more money and just driving yourself onto the next level. However, as I've become slightly older and wiser, I've very much learned to find out that what one person's success is another person's misery. And I know I've spoken to our mutual friend Mark on a number of occasions, and he said to me that his old next door neighbour was the most successful guy that he's ever met. And ultimately, all he done was went to work every day. I think he was a dustman.
I was about to ruin your storyline then, and so I know Mark as well. Yeah, he was the most successful bin man he knows.
Yeah, but he was the happiest bin man that he's ever met. So that started to kind of change my perception of what I really felt success was. And through reading and listening to other kind of podcast material, etc. I remember one guy saying that his definition of success was happiness.
Is that what drives you now? The pursuit of happiness.
You know what? Now, I actually think what drives me is creating a great environment and a great life for all the people that work within my business or within our business.
Amazing.
That is genuinely my main motivator now, to help all the guys in our organisation be the best that they can be.
Well, you're talking there around culture as well, aren't you? Because then that culture comes down. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, And it all flows down from a contagion effect, and it needs to cause somewhere. So you're having accidental culture or on purpose culture. And if you're the one who's setting that culture out there, looking after the people, wanting the best from them, then it's gonna come back to you. It's gonna go out to the customers. It's gonna get noticed. People talk nowadays about competitive advantage. We was talking about marketing before you came on. But ultimately, yeah, all right, you've got to have visibility. You've got to have that audience. But people see through the bullshit. And ultimately, we are in the people-to-people business. So, yeah, we have to show this, but authentically as well. It lives and breathes in your driver.
Yeah. I'd never really, I suppose I'd never really thought about that before. But when you put it like that, a lot of the things that you just mentioned there do ring true when we look at the service that our staff are delivering to our clients.
That's what happens when you come on a podcast with an organizational psychologist, by the way. So should have given you a pre-warning there. Right, John, the listeners right now, I think that was extremely valuable because I love the work that you do, and you do it in a unique way. That was important to set because it's not just about the context of here's what an accountant does and why I've got there. It's understanding the person behind it. Understanding the team, the culture, and what you're building is contributing towards all this. So thank you for sharing that at the start. Let's get into some numbers. Okay, this is a special opportunity. I've got an accountant in front of me, but I've got an accountant entrepreneur, John Charman. Okay, so what's the wake-up call that we really hear then? When you started working with business owners then in accounting, what were the biggest financial blind spots that you saw?
Well, I mean, certainly when when we began our journey 6 years ago, we were kind of we were brand new, we were unestablished. So the businesses that you were working with, a lot of the time, they were very young. And interestingly enough, we'd just ask people at the beginning of the call, what do you think your turnover was last year? And it was alarming how many people would just say, do you know what? I've got absolutely no idea.
Insane. Crazy.
Yeah. And that's where, and don't get me wrong, as we've kind of come along our journey, we're dealing with much larger businesses now. And also I think accountancy software has got a big part to play in people's changing attitudes towards knowing their numbers a little bit better. All right, because with the years ago, it used to be just Sage 50, and unless you were you was a proper, obviously years ago, bookkeeping just a proper old school way. You done Sage 50 or you done it on paper ledgers, and it was a lot of effort, and people just thought, yes, it's boring. And I think, don't get me wrong, there's still going to be a lot of people out there that think it's boring, but certainly with the advancements on some of the cloud-based softwares, your Xeros, your QuickBooks, the Sage 1 out there, all of a sudden these companies have broken the terminologies down to make it slightly more understandable for small business owners. And whilst most people aren't able to do all of their bookkeeping themselves, and ultimately most of the time when they do it themselves, it does end up getting in a little bit of a mess, because it's more easily accessible, and all they've got to do is log in. All of a sudden, people do take a little bit more interest in their numbers from time to time, but still not as many people as what they should.
Yeah, is that what you find?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you still see a lot of. You kind of get people at the opposite ends of the spectrum. You get the people that literally, as long as there's enough money in the bank account, they don't care, and you get the people at the other end that want to know the ins and outs of absolutely everything. and I think I don't know the exact point at which it really, really starts becoming important, but a lot of people haven't necessarily got businesses. They've got jobs that end up trading through limited companies as a tax efficient strategy, basically. All right, and you kind of, anyone with revenues of maybe anything up to 125,000 a year, a lot of the time they're just getting their weekly, monthly wage into the account and they draw it out, and that's kind of as far as it goes. But I think when you start getting into, the revenues of 250k and above, all of a sudden it's very, very easy to get lost in the numbers. All right, because people, let's face it, Lewis, anyone that doesn't really understand accountancy, or a lot of business owners that aren't very well versed in it, they just look at their bank balance as a benchmark of whether they're doing well or not. And of course, it all looks great for 3 months until your VAT bill comes along, and it either takes the bank balance right down, or some people even say we can't afford it. How has it ended up being that much? And it actually ends up being a result of the fact that they've been losing money for the previous few months. They just hadn't realised it.
Amazing. I mean, that isn't the accountant's job, to help to make them run a business. But in defense of what I mean by that is that it's not your job to babysit them on every in and out of their numbers. They can pay you extra to do it for you, but the responsibility is with the owner. Now, to defend the owner, if you was to go and buy a 10-ton truck, 7.5-ton truck, and just go, I'm just going to drive this truck around this city and residential estates where there's kids playing. I'm going to jump on a motorway and do 60, 70, whatever you're doing. You're just driving this truck. But you've never been given a license to drive a truck. You've never even passed your license to drive a car. Why the fuck are people allowed to just have businesses without this sort of training? People's lives, hiring people. You know what it's like? You hire family members. It's great. People say, don't ever hire family members again, or hire family members because they're great. They're great to work with. You see both ends of it, right? Limiting beliefs. But regardless of that, these people are people that you are bringing into your family to drive on your bus, your truck. And they're just driving around with you blindfolded, not knowing your numbers of how they're actually going to get paid at the end of this month. Scary stuff, mate. And they rely on the accountant then, after they've smashed the truck up a little bit throughout the year. Accountant, can you put it right for us?
That certainly rings true and sounds familiar. No, you're absolutely right. It's a real interesting concept around. It's a real interesting concept around people's understanding of what an accountant does. It's a real interesting, because ultimately most people's understanding of accountant is very much, it's your job to get my tax bill down, and that's it. And ultimately, look, that's a big part of what we're in place to do. It's a big part of what we're in place to do. However, no one really ever asks us, okay, John, how do we make more money? No one even asked that question. And ultimately, whilst there's other people in place, like coaches, for example, to help understand that, how to get to the next level. There seems to be this gap with small businesses. They want to maybe move to the next level, but they haven't necessarily got the budget to pay for someone to help them get to the next level. And then it kind of becomes a little bit of a vicious cycle, because then they don't make the investment to get someone to help them. And then a lot of the time it can end up going wrong.
If they don't get the help.
And that's not just from an advice point of view. That can be from a bookkeeping point of view.
Yeah, I mean, back to the driving license thing. When you learn to pass your test, your driving test, did you just self-learn?
Occasionally, no.
Okay, we won't go there. That's not a podcast anyway. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's a real strange one. But there is a gap. There is a gap because people can't. You couldn't just pick up an accounting book and understand what numbers look like. It would teach you all the technicalities of how to recognise things, but it wouldn't. Business owners are looking for the headline figures. Yeah, and they need to understand. I think for a business owner, it's alarming how many business owners don't understand what a balance sheet is. Yeah, everyone kind of understands the profit and loss. All right, because that's just adding a few numbers up and going, yeah, the motor expenses figure or the insurance figure looks about right.
Yeah, because the correlation to that, by the way, is dividends.
Yes.
So there's a driver behind that.
Yeah.
I need to know and understand this. Well, you're saying most business owners, mate. A lot of them don't.
No, correct.
You're saying most in your terms after you probably taught them, but a lot of people don't know how to read a P&L either.
Yeah, and I'll explain to all the listeners now a really kind of simple version of what a balance sheet is. A balance sheet is essentially, if you stopped trading today, how much would you be left with after you sell your assets? Like, we're talking about plant and equipment, motor vehicles, computer equipment, anything like that. You're collecting all the money that you're owed. You sell off any excess stock, but then you pay out all of it. And then with that, you then pay off all of your outstanding liabilities, any VAT that you owe, any corporation tax that you owe, any pay as you earn that you owe, any suppliers, any bank loans, anyone else that might be owed money. So you collect it, you look at how much money you've got, how much money you're due to collect in, and then how much money you've got to pay out. And what you're left with, that's your balance sheet value in a simple term.
Well, it's important to understand this, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
How many people are, I'm using this car analogy a lot, how many people are just driving their car, not understanding? I mean, imagine getting in the car and it's got no dashboard. It hasn't got a dashboard to it. It's just like, oh, okay, this like a Tesla when I first jumped in it, actually. But yeah, if there's no speedo, if there is no how much fuel or electric is left, if there is no revometer, you can just imagine no warning signals. Yeah, how many people are just doing this? And to be fairness to again, I always put it from a business owner. I remember back in my journey when I first started, it's like, well, great, I don't need to know this. I just need to go out there, make more sales, and get it out there and make sure the customer's happy and get more sales again. But numbers are the language of business. You need to understand every number. I mean, if you break down the balance sheet numbers, the P&L numbers, those figures have got there from an equation of other numbers. Your revenue didn't come from just revenue. Revenue is an outcome of some work that you've done, a behavior that you've done. So what contributes to the revenue? Well, okay. Well, let's look at our marketing. What did we generate from the marketing? What sort of, when we did generate that stuff, what was the likelihood of it coming on board? What was the likelihood of the cost of acquisition? What's the lifetime value of those people? That's the sort of stuff that comes into the revenue. And then when you look at the marketing and break it down even further, well, how consistent was we? What sort of behaviors were we doing around it? Is there any leading indicators right now? A big company that I've got, we get a lot of requotes. We know when we're about to get busy, predictability, because of the level of requotes that's coming through. People don't ask for requotes if they're not interested. So there's leading indicators. And one thing for me, John, as a business owner, and I share it with other people, and you probably resonate with this quite a lot, is the amount of clients that I work in coaching that when they first start out, they lose sleep because they don't know where their business is going to be tomorrow. Never mind in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So getting a great cash flow forecast. And it's not easy, but the more that you know the numbers, the more that you can predict the future. Learn from the past and predict the future. And the better you sleep at night, what's the foundation of all human beings? The quality of sleep that they're getting from the night before. So it affects everything. It affects relationships. It affects life. It affects family. All coming down to knowing your numbers. What sort of numbers do you think should be on that dashboard? I'm not talking as an accountant now, mate. Talking as a CEO.
So I'd say, I can't remember the numbers, but people talk to me about it on a number of occasions that essentially the number one reason that business owners go bust is to do with cash flow. And I think the real danger with the cash flow is that whilst you're growing, and I have this conversation very regularly with business owners, they always say to me, John, why is it that I'm growing? I'm doing more and more revenue. Like I must be making more money, but why is it that I don't seem to have any extra money in the bank account? And what interestingly I find, Lewis, amongst a lot of business owners is that a lot of businesses grow, and the only time that they'd ever really realise that they've made a lot more money is if they just stopped trading and collected everything in that was owed to them. Because that's what happens. You grow, if you're on 30-day payment terms and you're doing £10,000 worth of revenue a month, typically you're going to be owed £10,000 most of the time. If all of a sudden you grow massively and you're doing £100,000 a month, all of a sudden you're owed £100,000 at any time, and you've got to bridge that £90,000 cash gap. And that's notwithstanding the fact, if I refer to an industry like construction, when you start doing bigger numbers with bigger clients, that 30 days then becomes 60 days, and you've got to pay your suppliers, you've got to pay your labour, you've got to pay all your other overheads that are going on. But ultimately, all you're doing is increasing the amount that you're owed all the time. And the thing is with it, Lewis, is that I think people, this generally happens to good people, good business owners that are, really heading in the right direction, but they just haven't thought about the cash flow forecast necessarily. A lot of the time, business owners love helping people. They've normally got, not always, but they've normally got a little bit of sales in them. And the moment someone asks them something, particularly the customer, yeah, no problem, we can do that for you. Without really thinking about the logic and what might happen going forward. We've got one particular client, a labour agency, that it's a very high pressure environment, all right, doing some big numbers on wafer thin margins, all right, because it's a volume game. But that guy can tell me 8 weeks in advance when he's going to run out of money, because he is meticulously on his cash flow forecast. And because of that, Lewis, whenever he calls up and says, like, this is going to happen, we've got 8 weeks to solve the problem. Rather than him coming to me and going, I'm going to run out of money, I can't pay the wages next week, what am I going to do? And it ends up being a huge flap, basically. But yeah, the whole thing with being owed more money at any point in time, that's a real kind of biggie, because businesses get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they just end up being owed more money.